ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायामुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठकी। So reading today from the 10th canto, chapter 8, chapter entitled Lord Krishna shows his universal form, text number 17. Puranena vrajapate sadavo dasyupiditaha आराजके रक्षमाना जिज्ञुर्दस्यून् समेदितः पुराणेन व्रजपते साधवो दस्युपीडितः आराजके रक्षमाना जिज्ञुर्दस्यून् समेदितः पुराणेन व्रजपते साधवो दस्युपीडितः आराजके रक्षमाना जिज्ञुर्दस्यून् समेदितः नीनो व्रजपति साधवो दस्युपीडितम् आराजके रक्षमाना जिज्ञुर्दस्यून् समेदितः पुराणेन व्रजपते Mataji's. Puranena vrajapate sadhavo dasyupidita arajake rakshamana jigyurdasyun sameditaha. Pura, formerly, Anena by Krishna, Vrajapate, O King of Vraja, Sadhava, those who are honest, Dasyupiditaha, being disturbed by rogues and thieves, when there was an irregular government, Rakshamanaha were protected. Jigyu conquered. Dasyun, the rogues and thieves. Sameditaha flourished. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O Nanda Maharaj, as recorded in history, when there was an irregular, incapable government, Indra having been dethroned, and people were being harassed and disturbed by thieves, this child appeared in order to protect the people and enable them to flourish. And he curbed the rogues and thieves. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Indra is the king of the universe. Demons, thieves and rogues always disturb Indra. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam. But when Indraris, the enemies of Indra, become prominent, Krishna appears. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridyante Yuge Yuge. Bhagavatam 1.3.28. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalitam Sri Vishakam Cha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamame Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare. Puranena Vrajapate Sadhavo Dasyupiditaha Arajake Rakshamana Jigyur Dashyun Sameditaha. O Nanda Maharaj, as recorded in history, when there was an irregular, incapable government, Indra having been dethroned, and people were being harassed and disturbed by thieves, this child appeared in order to protect the people and enable them to flourish, and he curbed the rogues and thieves. So seeking the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas to be able to say something that we have heard from the Acharyas. So we are continuing here. Garga Muni is addressing Nanda Maharaj and revealing to him what exactly was the background of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. And in this particular verse, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about how it is that although Indra is the king of the universe, Indra is always harassed by demons. And in this connection, Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very well-known verse, Ete Chamsakala Pumsam Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the nature of this material world is, Srila Prabhupada was in fact giving a class in Los Angeles in 1972 on this verse, on the first canto. And Srila Prabhupada was mentioning that in this world there are two categories of people, the devotees and the demons. And the nature of Kali Yuga is that devotees always have overpowering influence as compared to the devotees. The demons have an overpowering influence as compared to the devotees. So this is the nature of Kali Yuga. And we see out in the material world how the demons are always trying to exert their superiority in all walks of life. And Srila Prabhupada was mentioning how in the year 1942, the British government, in order to enslave the Indians, or rather trying to make them as part of the army, were actually creating a situation of an artificial scarcity. So there were food grains that were plentifully available outside, but the British government was accumulating all this food grains, and they were storing them and not making them available to the public. And then through that there was an artificial scarcity created, and the prices of all the commodities went up, and the Indian population, the Indian people, being basically very poor, they were finding that this basic necessities of life were going completely out of their reach. And then the British government made an announcement that all those who are willing to join the army will be given free rations. So this is the way by which the British were trying to attract the Indians into their army. And typically in a very demoniac way, they were trying to control all the necessities of life, which is actually available to everybody. As Srila Prabhupada once was mentioning that this, what is capable of being produced by Mother Nature is actually sufficient to feed 10 times the population that is presently there. Not just the existing population, but actually 10 times the population. But because the demoniac personalities are ruling over this material nature, the tendency is to somehow or the other divert these necessities that are being produced into sense gratification. And the Vegetarian Society and so many other societies have made this analysis that actually in order to produce 1 pound of beef, almost 30 to 40 pounds of food grains are required. And the same food grains, if they were to be eaten by the common people, I mean by the public at large, they would be so much satisfied and they would be so much more nourished. But because of this desire to somehow or the other eat this non-vegetarian food, the tendency is to produce more and more beef. So this human civilization where the man is considering himself to be a free person and having the ability to be able to control material nature is actually in a situation where he is a prisoner. He is a prisoner of the senses, although he may actually consider himself to be free. And because of unlimited desire for sense gratification, he is trying his level best to be able to satisfy his lust. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that this is the propensity of a demoniac person, that he has this insatiable amount of lust in him. And this insatiable amount of lust is driving him to do all sorts of activities. And we see from the scriptures how this particular propensity is being exemplified by so many different characters in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like if you take the example of Maharaj Vena. Now Maharaj Vena was a highly desired son by Anga, right? Because Anga did not have any child, and as per the Vedic system, in order to be elevated to the heavenly planets we need to have a son. So Maharaj Anga performed a sacrifice, and through this sacrifice, he got a son, whom he named Vena. But unfortunately, this particular son, because he was born in the family of a demoniac personality, because his mother, Sunita, was actually the daughter of death personified, he was actually completely irreligious. And right from his childhood, he was engaging in all sorts of mischievous activities, to the extent of, teasing children and playing, killing animals and birds unnecessarily and causing so much of difficulty to the population at large. This was the thing that was giving him maximum satisfaction. And then, when it came to Maharaj Anga, and he was seeing that he was not able to control his child, and although he was preaching to him and trying to control him to this best possible extent, he was seeing that this boy Vena was completely oblivious to his corrections. Then Maharaj Anga actually started repenting and started thinking to himself, oh my God, it would have been so much more fortunate not to have a son. And in fact, he was repenting to himself in this way, that those who don't have a son have actually performed so many pious activities in their previous lives. So this was his meditation, that it would be better not to have a son than to have a son like this rascal, Vena. And then Maharaj Anga decided that this is actually the Lord's arrangement. To have a son like Vena actually creates a lot of detachment in a parent. Because the parent somehow realizes the futility of this human form of life, that I cannot get any enjoyment. Even if I have a son who I was desiring so much, yet he is giving me so much of unhappiness. So this was an opportunity that Krishna arranged for Maharaj Anga to retire into the forest, and then he went home back to Godhead. And then when the sages saw that there was nobody to continue to rule the kingdom, although Vena was not the appropriate person at all, because they had no choice. Because in the Vedic system, there is a need for a king to control the population. Because if there is no king to control the population goes berserk. And there is rogues, thieves, who become prominent. So although the sages knew that Vena was not the appropriate person to be the king, they put him on the throne. And Vena, now, there is a saying that power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right? So, Vena became absolutely powerful now. And then he became so horribly malicious and mischievous that, nobody was actually, and all the sages and everybody was in so much of put into so much of hardship. So finally all the sages got together and said, okay, let us make a final appeal to this person and try to see whether he can actually be rectified. And they went to him, and then they told him that, my dear Vena, what you're doing is not right. You have to understand that you're the king, and actually the king is supposed to be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you have to be actually protecting all the citizens. So they pleaded with him. But then Maharaj Vena was so much puffed up and so arrogant that actually he told the sages that you all should be actually worshipping me. I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, I am the person who is a bona fide representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all the prayers and meditation that you all are doing should be done for me. So the sages immediately became so angry that they uttered this word, hum. And in a second, Vena was destroyed. He was dead. So similarly, we see also Kamsa, how, here is a person who is so attached to his sister that at the time when his sister is getting married and the sister has to be taken to her husband's place, Kamsa takes on the role of a charioteer. Right? The role of a charioteer is not actually a very auspicious role. Yeah, we all know from the Mahabharata how it was that Karna was adopted into this family of Adhiratha, who was a charioteer. And when Karna showed his prowess as an archer before the assembly, and people could see that actually he was actually superior to Arjuna. At that time, when everybody was glorifying Karna, his father, his adopted father, Adhiratha, came towards him in order to embrace him. And then everybody could see that actually Karna was connected in a very close way with this charioteer. And then right in front of the whole assembly, Bhima insulted Karna to say that, how can a charioteer ever aspire to be a king, or ever aspire to be in the assembly of all these Kshatriyas? So a charioteer is not a very respectable profession. But then here is Kamsa, the king, who is taking on this role of a charioteer because of his affection towards his sister. But then just when he hears this Akashvani, when he hears the sound, vibration, which tells him that, in a short while he would be dead, killed by the child that is going to be born from the womb of his sister, his entire consciousness completely gets transformed. And he immediately grabs the hair of his sister, who all along he has been worshipping her, grabs her hair and draws out his sword in order to cut off her head. And then Vasudeva had to plead with so many different ways, telling Kamsa that, finally at the end of the day, what is the person who is really going to be of threat to you is not Devaki, but she's a woman after all, and what it'll do to you in the eyes of society if you were to be killing a woman. So please release her, and I assure you that whatever child is born of Devaki will be brought to you by me. And a very important lesson over here to be learned is that although Kamsa was a demon, in those days even demons had this particular quality of being able to appreciate a person's integrity. So although Kamsa was a demon, when he saw that Vasudeva was giving him this promise that when a child would be born, I'll bring the child to you, immediately he let go of Devaki. So that was the integrity of the demons in those days, which is not there, unfortunately, today. Demons, they make a promise, or anybody, even for that matter, even if it's a non-demon, when he makes a promise, nobody believes them anymore, because this is the age of untruthfulness. So then, Vasudeva, in fact, when the first child was born, immediately Vasudeva carried the child to Kamsa. And then Kamsa saw that, my God, here is a person who is so true to his word that he has brought his child to be killed by me. So immediately he told Vasudeva, no, it's okay, no problem, you can take the child back. It's perfectly all right. And Vasudeva, although he knew that, this is a slight reprieve that he got from Kamsa, because ultimately he knew that Kamsa was a demon and, prone to so much of sense gratification that his heart is so hard that he can never be trusted. So today he is saying that you take the child back, but tomorrow who knows what will happen. Right? So in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that this is the quality of a demon who has this, who takes shelter of insatiable lust and who is absorbed in conceit of pride and false prestige. And they are always sworn to unclean work, being attracted to the impermanent. So the nature of a demon is always to think that whatever he is doing is permanent. He thinks that this material world is permanent, everything is shashwat, and whatever he is producing is permanent. And that's the reason why you see this economic development that is taking place is just because a person thinks that he is not going to die. He is going to live forever. Right? Otherwise, why would a person ever involve himself in so much of economic development when, it's just going to be taken away in a matter of time? It's just a few moments actually, in the span of eternity is actually milliseconds. But then he thinks that in my 60, 70, 80 years of life, I'm going to be achieving. I mean, he doesn't even realize that his lifespan is so limited. But then he spends so much of his energy in trying to accumulate material wealth. And this whole whole civilization is driven by this desire to accumulate and drive the sense gratification or facilities for sense gratification of mankind. Because if this particular drive was not there, then there would not be so much of irregular activities that is going on. But because of this drive, because of this acceptance of the fact, or because of the thought process from his side that this is permanent, and whatever I'm going to do will last forever, he is in so much illusion. So what is actually impermanent, he thinks it to be permanent. And then we have, this huge corporations which are indulging in all sorts of, activities, demoniac activities, just to gain more and more power. Finally, organizations are made of people, human beings like you and me. But this illusion is so strong that I am the controller and I have to achieve so much in my life. So if you see from the life of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he started the Gaudiya Math, he started the Gaudiya Math in a very small way, but he was very clear that the whole purpose of the Gaudiya Math was to make Vaishnavas. And Vaishnavas are basically people who are very docile, very gentle, because they understand that this body is going to be with us only for a short while. It's a matter of time before which this body is taken away. So let me try my level best to engage in all those activities which are good for the soul. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ensured that that drive that makes a person go mad after material aspirations is removed from his disciples. And that was the reason why he would ensure that his disciples actually followed this process of sadhana bhakti so strictly. They were chanting 64 rounds every day. And what it basically meant is that till 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you are engaged in chanting your rounds, right? And after you chant your rounds, then you have a little bit of prasad, you take some rest, you go out in the evening to preach. And then you come back early so that you can sleep early and get up the next day morning for your sadhana once again. So the 64 rounds ensured that a person was kept fixed up in sadhana so that his mind would not get diverted into doing those activities which were, actually demoniac. So this was the power of our paramparas, but still the material nature is so strong that even a person who is so much fixed up in Krishna consciousness gets diverted because of this desire to lord over this material nature. Even when we come into our spiritual life, we find that there is so much of this propensity that is still within us. And that is the time when we actually have to question ourselves whether we are actually trying to serve Krishna or whether we are trying to serve our senses. Because the nature of a person is always to try and prove himself. He wants to establish the fact that I am the most superior. Right? And we have been saying from time immemorial, all the people who have been, so-called great people, even if you take Alexander the Great or Hitler, what was his basic, what are the basic thing that was driving him? Just the thought that I should be the most, actually he was trying to take the position of Krishna. The supreme controller, he wanted to be the supreme controller of this particular material world. And his whole life he was trying to endeavor only for this purpose. In just 3 days from now, we would be observing the 100th anniversary of the Titanic, right? The only thing that actually emerged out of the Titanic disaster was that there was a movie made, which was one of the most successful movies in the history of the movies. It grossed the maximum amount of money. Millions and millions of dollars were made by people seeing, because this propensity is also there in us that when we come across a disaster, we are attracted towards it. We want to see what actually happened. But 100 years back, when the people boarded this Titanic on the 15th of April 1912, 15th of April 1912 was actually the date when this disaster took place. So they must have boarded it a week or 2 weeks before. Extremely wealthy people, because only extremely wealthy people could board the Titanic, because the Titanic was a ship that couldn't sink. It was advertised like that this is a ship that can't sink. And in fact, it was constructed that way. This, I mean, if one Googles into the net, you'll be able to see so much of information now on the Titanic, because obviously, 100 years, people are not celebrating, but at least trying to figure out what exactly happened 100 years back. But actually, this ship had 8 airtight chambers. A normal ship would have only 4, but this ship had 8 airtight chambers. Just to ensure that, and only if 5 of those airtight chambers were to break or were to burst, then the ship would actually be in trouble. And not even sink. It would not even sink at that time. It would be in trouble. Right? So everybody who boarded the ship at that time were completely convinced that this is a ship that could never sink. And then people were so caught up in this advertisement of this company which were operating the ship that there were so many of these boats that were kept on the galley on the wayside of the ship. It was a huge ship. So there were these boats which you could put them into the water in case but then in case there was an accident. But then everybody was told that this is an unsinkable ship. So they were thinking that these boats are coming in my way. What is the point in having these boats? And they just threw those boats overboard. So most of the boats were gone. There were just very few boats that were remaining on the ship. And then on this fateful day, there's just 3 days from now, 100 years back, it hit this iceberg. And somehow by the inconceivable arrangement of the Lord, who just wanted to show us that, there is nothing that is actually permanent in this world. Dukhalayam ashashvatam. This is a world which is of misery and which is impermanent, right? And how would the Lord ever accept the fact when somebody is advertising to the whole world that this is something which is completely permanent? How would the Lord ever accept that? So, on this fateful day, the ship hit this iceberg. And within a few hours, and somehow by the arrangement of the Lord again, 5 of these airtight chambers burst open. And that was adequate. And this was like freezing winter, and and the true nature of a human being comes out at times of distress. Because here were people who were actually enjoying themselves, and they were so happy with each other, and they were thinking that life is so wonderful. We are the most privileged people in the world. We are so fortunate to be on this ship. The whole world will be envying us because we are on this ship. And when this disaster happened, it was everybody for himself. There is no more any, you're my friend, we are relatives, and we are so close to each other. We know each other for 20 years, 30 years, and we are part of this elite club of multi-millionaires. It was absolutely everyone for themselves. And everybody was trying their level best to get into the small number of boats that were available. Right? And actually it is said that most of the people who died actually died because they just jumped overboard. If they had waited for help to come, most of the people who died could actually have been saved. But there was so much of panic. So sometimes when we get into this illusion that this material world is permanent, which happens to us all the time, then Krishna creates situations like this to tell us, no, it's nothing permanent about this material world. It is actually Dukhalayam ashashvatam. So Srila Prabhupada was mentioning in this particular class in Los Angeles that exactly as opposed to the demons, we have the devotees. And devotees are by nature non-competitive. As I had explained, the whole material nature runs on this particular aspect of competition, trying to be better than the other person, right? Now, recently we read in the papers about this young person who was the managing director of a very well-known company at the age of 42 years. And he was a person who was so athletic. He would go to the gym every day, he would go on marathon running, he would take so much care of his body. But then just one fine day when he had just returned back from the gym, a massive heart attack, and he was dead at the age of 42. And nobody really knew why this person had died. I mean, what is the cause of his death? They could not figure out. I mean, here was a person who apparently had everything going on for him. He was a very, very successful person, extremely successful. But what was it that was actually the result cause of his death? And then they found out in a small line in that particular news article that this person would actually sleep only 4 to 5 hours every day. So although he took apparently very good care of himself, the law of material nature caught up with him. You cannot drive your body beyond a particular stage. So devotees, when they come across such situations, then they understand that this is what they should not be doing. Not to have a life which you're driving yourself to achieve so much. You take relatively a back seat. And then you see that how devotees, over a period of time, they get attracted to the association of devotees, to chanting the holy names and coming to the temple. And there is, when you see devotees that they are practicing their Krishna consciousness so nicely. Like recently in Mayapur, I was just seeing that there was a 2-year-old girl who was in the arms of her mother. And the moment she came into the temple, she started pointing out to her mother that this is Tulsi Maharani, take me over there. So, and I was really quite surprised. I mean, here's just a 2-year-old girl, and how does she know so much about Tulsi Maharani? And her mother took her to Tulsi Maharani, and this girl, 2-year-old girl, she takes the water from this pot, from this small cup, and puts it into Tulsi Maharani. Absolutely with no assistance from the mother. She just takes this and puts it into Tulsi Maharani. And then she puts her finger into Tulsi Maharani and puts it on her head. And I was just thinking to myself, how is it possible that a child of 2 years could have so much of impressions that, it's carried in her mind, that worshipping Tulsi Maharani has become completely spontaneous. Like we have, Dayanandi Prabhu's son, every Thursday when we do the dressing of the deities, he's here. The last few Thursdays he's not been coming, but today, at 5 o'clock in the morning, fresh, wearing a tilak and dhoti and kurta, he's there ready on the altar. He wants to assist in doing deity worship. And it is his responsibility to be doing the dressing of the cows and Tulsi Maharani. And he considers that, he's doing a very important service, right? So it's a very special attraction that we have for devotional service, and the children that we see in Krishna consciousness are extremely special. And it is not that a person who is doing, sometimes we get we are under the impression that a person who is doing, a particular activity, if he's doing it extremely well, then that particular person is very close to Krishna. It is not necessarily the case. Like we see from the life of Kala Krishna Das. Now, Kala Krishna Das was an actual associate of the Lord in the sense that he was actually serving him on a day-to-day basis. Right? He was traveling with him all over South India. But then one moment of inattention and Kala Krishna Das was captured by Maya. Right? So just because we are very close in a material sense, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are very advanced in our Krishna consciousness. As Srila Prabhupada would give this example of a fly and say that sometimes a fly is sitting on my dhoti, doesn't mean that the fly is very close to me. Right? And we can see also how it is that there were these disciples of Srila Prabhupada who were so close to him and they were doing so much of intimate service. But then after Srila Prabhupada departed from this planet, we find that they are no longer there in Krishna consciousness because they were so much attached to the Vani, to the Vapu, that they forgot to get attached to the Vani. And when the Vapu is removed, they find that they are helpless. So actual being close to the spiritual master and being close to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually doing our service. And by doing our service, the spiritual master, the Paramatma is there in the heart of the spiritual master. He knows what is it that we are doing. It is not necessary that every time we have to be coming in front of our spiritual master and making it known to him that we are doing a particular service. The spiritual master knows what service we are doing. And ultimately, as Srila Prabhupada was telling us today morning in a class that we were hearing, his disciple was asking Srila Prabhupada, what is it that actually pleases you the most, Srila Prabhupada? And Srila Prabhupada said very clearly, just chant Hare Krishna. That is what actually pleases the spiritual master. We may think that we are actually pleasing the spiritual master by doing this service or that service, or by being always around the spiritual master. No. This movement is so perfect that you can be intimately connected to the spiritual master by service. Like I remember His Holiness Niranjan Swami was once asked, how often has he met Srila Prabhupada? Now here is a sannyasi who is practicing Krishna consciousness for the last 40 years, traveling all over the world, preaching Krishna consciousness. Thousands and thousands of people, whoever comes across him gets attracted to Krishna, right? And when he was asked this question, how often have you actually met Srila Prabhupada? And Niranjan Swami said that I have not met Srila Prabhupada even once. And in fact, there were so many disciples of Srila Prabhupada who were actually initiated by letter. Like we met one disciple of Srila Prabhupada who is preaching in South America, one of the most difficult places in the world to actually preach. Difficult because for them Krishna is so far away in one sense, They're so far away from India. It's nearly 20,000 kilometers, right? Just to come to India, they have to travel nearly 24 hours by flight. And if one really goes to South America, one would hardly find any Indian over there. That's how remote South America is. Indians are known to be all over the world, right? Wherever you go, you'll find Indians, right? So South America is a place that you would not see. When we were there a few years back, we never saw a single Indian in South America. And all the 3 weeks that we were there, they must have been somewhere, but we never saw them. So the place is so far away from Bharatvarsha that really, there is no possibility of coming into contact with Krishna. But this devotee, who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, in Mayapur, we were just talking to each other over Prashadam. And then I introduced myself and he introduced himself, and actually I had not heard about him. And then he was a brahmachari, he was wearing saffron, nearly 60 years old. So I asked him, when did you meet Srila Prabhupada? Can you tell me something about your interaction with Srila Prabhupada? And he said, I never ever met Srila Prabhupada in my life. He said, I was initiated by Srila Prabhupada through a letter. And yet, 37, 38 years after Srila Prabhupada has departed from this planet, here is a person who is preaching in one of the most difficult places in the world to preach. And so enthusiastic in his Krishna consciousness. Wearing saffron, dhoti and kurta. It's inconceivable how a person could ever be wearing this robes, and it's so alien in a place like South America. So that's the power of service. If we are attached to service, just doing what we have been asked to do, just doing what is there as per our propensity, and not trying to compete with other devotees, Krishna will be pleased. Because that is what Krishna finally wants from us. And in the spiritual world, it is not as if everybody is Sridhama or everybody is Madhu Mangal, right? Direct associates of Lord Krishna. We also have the deer, and we have the cows, and we have the grass, and we have the trees, and the plants, and butterflies, and bumblebees, and all this living entities are also there in the spiritual world, but they are also serving Krishna in their own capacity, and Krishna is accepting their service. Right? Sometimes we have this notion that only if we are serving the spiritual master in a very intimate way, then we'll actually go home back to Godhead. But the scriptures tell us something different. We don't have to be worried. If we are doing our service to the best of our ability and being sincere and doing our service without any ulterior motives, then for sure Krishna will take us back home, back to Godhead, irrespective of whether we are very close physically to the spiritual master or not. So that is the beauty of our movement, which is giving us so much of hope that everybody, whoever he may be, whoever he or she may be, has this ability to serve Krishna according to their capacity. Yeah. And finally, at the end, we know that when the living entity goes home back to Godhead, what does the Lord do? The Lord is playing with all his cowherd boys in the pasture grounds of Vrindavan, and as soon as he sees Gopkumar coming, he just goes running towards him. Goes running and embraces him. And tears starts coming from his eyes. And then he tells Gopkumar that I've been waiting for you for such a long time. Where were you? Why didn't you come earlier? And Gopkumar represents all living entities in this material world, each and every one of us, whether we are human beings or whether we are even a grass, in one sense, if it's hearing the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, could get elevated and go home back to Godhead. A dog could go home back to Godhead. What to talk about us? Right? The dog that was accompanying Shivanand Sen went home back to Godhead. So we just have to be attached to our service, doing what we are asked to do as per our propensity by the authorities, and not be bothered whether we are actually getting the direct mercy of the spiritual master or not. And Krishna will take us back home, back to Godhead at the appropriate time. Whenever he feels that we are fit and we have cleansed ourselves of all our anarthas of pride, greed, lust, anger, envy, Krishna will take us back home, back to Godhead. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Sorry, it's 9:15, so we won't take any questions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hare Hare Bol.